Okay, Jan. Hey, it's great to have you here. We know each other from Hotel Quickly, right? We worked together back in Thailand. So as we are preparing the training for recruiters who are recruiting IT tech talents, I was wondering what's your experience with hiring technical talents, developers, because I know that you are a CTO in Entrido, right? A very promising startup. So. I'm curious, how do you manage the team? How do you manage the software development? What frameworks do you use? So I have a lot of questions prepared. If you would start with the first one. So what are the techniques and frameworks you use on a daily basis? Can you elaborate on this one?
Yeah, hi. So we use Neta framework the most because it's very popular in Czech Republic and it has a really huge community of developers in here. Then we use some Symfony components. We use React.js, which is a framework in JavaScript. So yeah, Neta is a framework of PHP. And both of them have different use cases. Neta is used for backend, and React is the front end. So these are frameworks we are using the most. And the technologies we use MySQL for database, and RabbitMQ for asynchronous task, and some components for sending emails. There are really many, but to mention, I would start with these frameworks.
Hmm. It's actually interesting that you use React for front end, right? It's not very common to use with PHP on the backend side, is it?
Well, depends. It is very popular last months or maybe last 2-3 years because the game has changed it a lot for technology projects. It used to be only framework for full stack and use classic HTML, CSS, And for last year, the JavaScript frameworks has approached its React, Angular. Vue.js is very popular since last year and maybe 2 years, and it has grown very much in popularity. I would
Hmm.
mention these three are very popular.
Hmm. Okay. What are the most popular or common tools you use on a daily basis? So say, what kind of IDEs do you use? Or
Yeah, okay, I see. The PHP Storm for IDE, it's the most popular program for PHP developers, then WebStorm for front-end developers. Yeah, for JavaScript, you can write React and Angular and other frameworks I mentioned very effectively in
Mhm.
this IDE, and it helps me on daily basis. And other tools I use, for example, Postman, because we write REST API and we can use it for proxy server, sending requests, testing, share requests with other developers. So that is something that really helps us to develop. Then some programs like Git clients, and I don't know, there is more tools like Composer instead of the programs.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. A lot of interesting tools that I guess we would need also to explain to recruiters who will be watching this. We can leave it for later. But you also mentioned this interesting trend with React and PHP. I'm wondering what other trends do you see happening these days in regards to the PHP world, which I'm sure you are very active in.
Yeah, it is very hot topic because there is GraphQL, a part of REST API that is completely different approach how to write applications. Because I would say it's like old school, do the PHP full stack in one framework. And what happened for us, we had a product written completely full stack, and then we just throw it away and started from scratch,
Mhm.
rewriting it with PHP and JavaScript with the REST API and JavaScript for UI. and it helped us to have two separated teams and develop much faster with this approach. That's why we decided to go this way.
Mm-hmm. So now you have a front-end team and a back-end team, right?
Yes, exactly.
Interesting. So if you would stick to PHP and you are hiring a developer, say a senior developer in PHP, how would you even recognize such a developer?
Yeah, the first thing is he can tell you he's senior, but never ever trust developers. So you should go to GitHub or GitLab and check their code. That's the point I would start with. Reading their code and focus on, if it's senior, he should really write tests and testable code. That's the first sign of a really senior developer. Then the thing, if he is active in open source community, he will probably be on high level. So that's something I would focus on.
It's interesting. And when you mention the open source community, is there any community that you are part of, say in Czech Republic, Slovakia, or Central Europe?
Yeah, in Czech Republic, it's a community PHPkaři, which I'm very active in. I have some speeches, even in English. I'm not really good speaker in English, but yeah, and I have lectures as well for this PHP and some hot topics.
Sorry, is the platform also good for recruiting developers? I mean, is there any dedicated place in this community?
It's very good. There is a Slack, PHPkaři Slack. There is over 1,500 people, and there is exactly this channel called Jobs. And you can basically write any job offer or ask for a job. And on daily basis, there are some very, very interesting jobs. And because this community is quite huge, but I would say there is some core of people, let's say 50 or 100, that knows each other. And they are something like very, very senior and helping each other how to write better job offer, for example, how to do something you cannot do. So yeah, it's the Slack channel. You ask something and you get an answer.
What about some other tools that the recruiters could use in the same way as you use them on the daily basis, say GitHub? Do you use GitHub to find developers?
No, not to find them, just to check their code and to check out how they think, how they commit. What is for me really important is commit messages, because if you, I met a lot of very bad commit messages, for example, blah, 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 stupid feature. And instead, if you meet commit message, adding this feature because of that is really explaining what is that commit doing, what adds it into the code. So commit message is something that could really help to find out if the developer is good or not.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah, so I don't know, I'm not using GitHub or GitLab for hiring developers, but to read their code. What for me, it's more important.
Do you also look at pull requests on GitHub?
Yep, definitely. There's it's not really difference between the pull requests and commits, but what is we can go a few steps back, and as I mentioned, the open source community, you can check if the developer commits only to his own repositories or he is contributing to something completely unknown for him, and that's something really good about the developers. If you find someone like this, then it's probably win-win situation.
And based on your experience, how many developers, say in percentages, how many developers commit to open source projects?
I would say it could be like 10 to 15%. I know in person.
That's quite a lot, actually. That's quite a lot.
Yeah, the situation is much better nowadays than it was a few years ago.
Interesting. And if we stick back to PHP as the programming language, would you would you be able to tell that, say, a developer is not senior because he uses some old, say, legacy part of PHP, say he's still on PHP 5 point something, or you cannot tell based on the version that he uses?
Yeah, at first I would ask the developer, why are you using this old version of PHP? Sometimes there might be an reason for it, but if he says like, because my boss told me so and I'm not able to change it, then yeah, I would definitely not go for him, because right now there is version 7.2, 7.2, 7.3 is coming out very soon. And it's not worth using anything older than 7.1. It's old school, and transition from 5.6 to 7.1, it's almost without breaking changes. So there is no reason to stick on this old PHP, and there is a huge performance boost for that. So definitely focus at least 7.1. And yeah, there are so many cool features like strict typing, which helps the language itself to be easily testable, write better code, and that's why you should never go for something less than 7.1.
That's a good one. What about version 6? Was it skipped?
Yeah, it was like Easter egg. At some point, the developers decided to not do it. So basically, the 6 is 5.6, and they said, "Oh, let's go straight to 7." So it's some kind of joke, Easter egg. I don't know how to call it, but 6 was completely skipped.
Let's talk about databases for a while. So what kind of databases do you use in your project?
Yeah, we use MariaDB, which is basically fork of MySQL, but there is no many differences for these databases. So we use this as our main data storage. Then we use MongoDB for some logs, and we have some plain text storages, but it's not like a database. It's for our log storage.
And when you're hiring a developer, do you also require him to know, say, MongoDB?
No, not really, because we use it only for some special use cases. So we might get a developer, and he will never get in touch with Mongo. So we only need to know the Maria or MySQL. It doesn't matter, but not the Mongo.
It's also interesting to think about the skills as something that could be adopted relatively quickly, right? You can learn the syntax of MongoDB relatively quickly. How do you think about skills in general? You know, what are the must-have skills that either you or recruiters should look for, and what are the skills that they can just learn on the job?
Well, that depends on level of the developer you are looking for, but mostly I want to hire senior developer, and what I'm looking for is some skills about learning and about language itself. So I don't focus on frameworks. I focus about that, how quickly he can learn something, because if you meet let's compare junior and senior. Junior maybe thinks about framework, that is something that is doing everything for him, but senior thinks about framework only that it's tool to achieve something and make it easier to achieve. That's something he thinks about the framework. So he will end up writing code that is framework agnostic, that it can be switched from framework, let's say Nete to Symfony or Laravel. It can be used anywhere, and he is writing reusable code. That is something I'm really looking for senior developers.
Can you elaborate further? What does it mean, framework agnostic?
Yeah, it means that it's not dependent on the framework. So the code does not rely on some component of the framework, only some utility classes that can be used anywhere. So that's why it is really easy to reuse that code. For example, you write something for project A. It might be, I don't know, Paygate for payments. And then you have project B, and you have the same use case. And instead of writing the same thing again from scratch, you just go to project A, take this code, and reuse it in project B. So you save a lot of time. And that's something what is called framework agnostic code.
So despite you use Netty on Entrido, you would hire a senior developer who doesn't or who hasn't experience working with Netty, right? Or?
Yeah, we would be able to do that because what we do is we use the framework only to get the request and send the response. It's something like it's very common use case. How is PHP used? It's basically the HTTP pattern. So we think about framework like this. So we write code that is not dependent on the framework. So yes, you are correct. We can hire a developer who has never seen Nete before.
Nice. What does your job description look like when you write it for a PHP developer? What do you put there?
Yeah, we were looking for basically the skills PHP 7.1, MySQL, and some cool stuff. But we focused on was soft skills. Communication is something that was really important for us, and then to decide how quickly can that person learn. Because we didn't want or even didn't need him to know everything. He can learn and grow with us. That's completely easy, but he must be the correct person, the right one to have these soft skills, and the motivation is very important.
Can I find a job post somewhere online?
I will send it to you after this interview, if it's okay.
That would be great. That would be great.
It's in Czech language, but I'm sure you can take something from it.
Indeed. Something inspiring for recruiters.
Yeah, we got from it a few very motivated people because we are startup, so we don't have much money. So we offered not really good salary, and still we were able to find a few very good and motivated people. So that's a sign of something that it was not bad.
There's a lot of love around your brand, this love brand.
Yeah, maybe.
That helps a lot. Very cool. I have one more question, which is related to a clean code. It's really hard to spot, if the code is clean or dirty, especially if you are not a developer. Is there any way a recruiter could spot that a developer doesn't have, say, the right attitude, or he doesn't use the best practices?
Yeah, there are few spots that can be very easily discovered that they are weak. So if we talk about the Symfony or Nete, there are the controllers, which is the main point that communicates. I don't know, should I describe what controller is, or?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, okay, so controller is for me the most important part that takes data from somewhere and pass them to the template or send them to the request. So it's something in the middle that is the most important part. And that's where the most dirty code usually appears. So I would focus on the first place here. If there is a lot of code in Presenter, then definitely the developer is not following the solid principles, which we can describe in a minute, and write a dirty code. So that is something I would start with the controller itself and check if the method is really long, and then there is not there is something wrong, definitely.
As you described it, I totally imagined the code back from Hotel Quickly from 6 years ago. I imagined the super long controller. It was such a dirty code. So
yeah, I can remember it. I think it was your code. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, it was largely mine because you know, I was the first one and we were going for the speed. So I'm also saying hi to Joseph, who may be watching this later.
Yeah. So I would start with this, and what usually happens is you start with writing huge methods, but then as a developer, you want to decouple it to move that
Mhm.
code somewhere else and
Mhm.
have these reusable parts and to not repeat yourself. You know?
Mhm.
That's something that's one part of the solid principle.
Mhm.
Solid principles, one letter stands for each letter stands for one principle, and
Mhm.
one of them is dry. It's the D letter.
Mhm.
Don't repeat yourself, and that is something what is decoupling for. You just take something and move it somewhere that it can be reused.
Mhm.
So good developers who writes clean code follows these principles.
Mhm. Solid and dry.
Solid is complete. It's five principles. Maybe
Mhm.
it would be awesome to give some link or something to read
Mhm.
more.
Mhm.
To not go into details. And dry, don't repeat yourself is one of
Mhm.
them.
Mhm. Okay, very cool, very cool. Great, this is a good one. I guess we could train recruiters just look at the controllers because they are relatively easy to find, right, in a file structure.
Yep.
So this is a very good one. Okay. Do you have any further recommendations for recruiters? You know, what should they focus on? How they can improve? How they can find the best developers?
I would start with that. You should know what you are looking for, because what happened for me when some headhunters were approaching me, they mixed all technologies up together, and because they are fancy and they sound cool, so you should really know what you are looking for. Because if you are looking for a backend developer, and you mention HTML or CSS, you will scare them out and they will run away.
Mhm.
Don't do this mistake again. So
That's a,
yeah, that's something they should figure out what they are looking for, what technology is used for what purpose,
mhm.
and to make it clear for themselves. That is very important, because yeah,
Mhm.
as I mentioned, this will scare them out, and you will probably not get a reply.
Mhm. That's interesting as you say it, and could imagine that also these two technologies like HTML and CSS are important for front-end developers. It's almost questionable if it adds any value, right? For example, to mention it for front-end developers, like would you say, hey, I'm looking for a senior front-end developer, he needs to write HTML? Does it even make sense?
Hmm. This is the basic stone. So if you are looking for senior, you expect that everyone knows the HTML. That is something that everyone must know. It's completely must have. So
Mhm.
sometimes it does not even make sense. So if you are looking for React developer or Angular or whatever in JavaScript, then there is no way they don't know the HTML. So yeah,
Mhm.
might be a waste of one one language there.
Yeah, yeah. It may help to streamline the focus, focus on only the one or two technologies. For example, what you mentioned, you are looking for a PHP developer who uses 7.1 and newer, and that's very clear and crystal clear.
Yeah, so it might help them if they don't mention the HTML, because you show that you know what you are doing. If you go straight for Nete or Symfony or whatever,
Mhm.
uh, yeah, this is more for the JavaScript, because if you are looking for backend developer which with PHP, you should decide if you are looking for full stack developer who will get in touch with the HTML and CSS,
Mhm.
or he will not. So
Mhm.
then it's backend or full stack.
All right, cool. There is so much interesting insights coming from you. I wonder if we can even digest it all within these allocated 20 or so minutes. So maybe we can wrap it up today, and we will maybe have a chance to continue in 2-3 weeks or so.
Okay, sure. There is so many things I could share, so it's completely up to you.
Okay. Thanks a lot for all your valuable insights. I totally appreciate your time. So have a wonderful day and we'll stay in touch, okay? Thanks you. Thank you. Cheers. Bye.